When my son stood up at the dinner table, raised his glass, and called me a walking wallet in front of the entire family, I felt something inside me go completely still. Not broken, not shattered. Just still, the kind of silence that comes right before a storm. He didn't whisper it. He didn't say it in anger. He said it like a joke, like I was the punchline. It was my granddaughter's 17th birthday. The table was full. Cousins, aunts, neighbors, Ethan's business friends. I had just gently reminded him about the loan, quietly, calmly. I leaned toward him and said, "Ethan, it's been 3 months. We should talk about when you'll start paying it back." That's when he leaned back in his chair and laughed. "Oh, Mom," he said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "You and your money. You act like I robbed a bank. It was a small loan. Relax." "Or what? You'll cut me off?" He smirked and lifted his glass higher. "Don't worry, everyone, she won't. She's basically a walking wallet." A few people chuckled, nervously. Others stared at their plates. Mia froze, and I sat there, hands folded in my lap, feeling the heat crawl up my neck. Not from embarrassment, from clarity. That was the moment I understood something I had been refusing to see. He hadn't forgotten the money. He had decided I didn't matter. "Hello, my dear friends. It's Grace. I'm so glad you're here today. Tell me something honestly. If your own child humiliated you like that, in front of your family, would you stay quiet? Or would you finally draw a line? Write it in the comments. I truly want to know." I didn't cry. That surprised even me. At 72, you would think I'd be fragile. That humiliation would crack me. But age does something unexpected. It removes illusions. And I had just watched mine dissolve in real time. The loan had not been small. $25,000 is not small to a widow living carefully off retirement savings. He had told me it was temporary. "Just a few weeks, Mom. Cash flow issue. My investor's transfer is delayed." He had even squeezed my hands when he said it. I remember that squeeze now. It wasn't affection. It was calculation. I excused myself from the table. No dramatic exit. No shaking voice. I simply stood up and said, "Enjoy dinner." As I walked toward the hallway, I heard him mutter, "See? Drama." And a couple of people laughed again, relieved to follow his lead. In the bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. My lipstick hadn't smudged. My hair was still perfectly pinned. My hands weren't trembling. But my eyes looked different. They looked awake. For months, I had sent polite reminders, gentle texts. "Whenever you're ready. Let's make a plan. Even small installments are fine." Each time he replied with vague promises. "Soon. Next week. Working on it." And tonight, he had turned my patience into a joke. No, not tonight. I walked back to the dining room, picked up my purse, and leaned down to kiss Mia on the cheek. She squeezed my hand under the table. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," she whispered. That nearly broke me. But instead of breaking, I made a decision. I would never again allow my own son to weaponize my love against me. When I stepped outside into the cool night air, I took out my phone. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I opened my banking app. The transfer was still there. The memo line clear. Loan, short term. He had typed that himself when he gave me the account details. And suddenly, something else became clear. He had assumed I would never use it. I got into my car, closed the door, and for the first time in my life, I considered taking my own child to court. Not out of revenge, out of respect for myself. At the table behind me, laughter rose again through the open windows. They thought the moment had passed. They were wrong. This was the moment it began. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was upset. Because I was thinking clearly for the first time in months. At 6:10 a.m., I was already sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and a folder I hadn't touched since the day I transferred the money. I keep everything. Always have. Bank receipts, printed confirmations, even handwritten notes. Inside the folder was the transfer confirmation. $25,000. Date. Time. His account number. And right there, in the memo line, he filled out himself. Loan. Short term. I stared at those 3 words for a long time. Short term. It had been 94 days. I turned on my phone and scrolled through our messages. Ethan, Mom, I just need a small loan, a few weeks max. Ethan, you know I'd never put you in a bad spot. Ethan, I'll send you a repayment schedule soon. Then the tone slowly shifted. Ethan, things are tight. Don't pressure me. Ethan, why are you making this a big deal? And finally, 2 weeks ago. Ethan, it wasn't like we signed anything. Families don't sue each other, Mom. That message sat heavier than the rest. Families don't sue each other. No. But families also don't humiliate each other at birthday dinners. At 7:02 a.m., I typed a message. Calm. Short. Clear. Ethan, I need written confirmation of when you will begin repaying the $25,000 loan. Please provide a payment schedule within 7 days. I read it 3 times. No emotion, no accusation, just fact. I pressed send. He replied 11 minutes later. Are you serious right now? I didn't respond. Another message came through. You embarrassed yourself last night. Everyone thinks you're overreacting. I set the phone face down on the table and took a sip of coffee. Then the third message arrived. If you're that desperate for money, just say so. Don't act like I owe you something. There it was. The rewrite. He wasn't just refusing to repay me. He was reframing the story, turning me into the unstable one, the needy one, the dramatic old woman clinging to her son's success. My chest tightened, not from hurt, but from recognition. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was strategy. I picked up the phone again and typed one final message. This is a formal request. If I do not receive a repayment plan in writing within 7 days, I will pursue legal options. I didn't add a heart emoji. I didn't soften it with love you. I pressed send. The typing bubble appeared immediately. You wouldn't dare. And then, don't threaten me, Mom. I stared at that last message for a long time. He was wrong about one thing. It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary. By noon, my sister called. What are you doing? She asked without greeting. Ethan says you're talking about lawyers. He owes me money, I replied evenly. He's your son. Yes, I said. And I am his mother, not his bank. There was silence on the line. Then the predictable words. Is this really worth tearing the family apart? I looked around my quiet kitchen, my neat counters, the framed photo of Ethan at age 6, holding my hand at the beach. The family had already shifted. I just hadn't acknowledged it yet. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and searched for something I had never imagined I would type. How to recover unpaid personal loan from family member. The search results filled the screen. Legal documentation. Small claims court. Written intent. Evidence of repayment terms. Evidence. I had more than I thought. I closed the laptop slowly. 7 days. I would give him exactly 7 days. But deep down, I already knew. He wasn't going to send a payment plan. He was going to send something else, and this time, I would be ready. On the 7th day at exactly 8 a.m., I checked my phone. No payment plan, no apology, no acknowledgement. Instead, there was a message sent at 1:14 a.m. You're really going to blow up your relationship with your only son over money? That's cold. That was it. No numbers, no dates, no responsibility. I didn't respond. I dressed carefully that morning. Navy slacks, cream blouse, low heels. The same way I used to dress when I volunteered at the hospital. Calm, respectable, composed. If I was going to take the next step, I would do it properly. The bank branch was quiet when I walked in. The young woman at the counter smiled politely. How can I help you today? I need printed documentation of a transfer I made 3 months ago, I said. Full transaction record, including memo notes and confirmation details. She nodded and typed for a moment. When the printer began humming, I felt something steady inside me. Not anger, not revenge, resolve. She handed me a stapled packet. There you go. Is everything okay? Yes, I replied. It will be. I stepped aside and reviewed the documents. There it was. The outgoing transfer. Amount, date, account ending in 4821, Ethan's account. And beneath it, clear as daylight. Memo. Loan, short term. I asked for one more thing. Could I also get a certified copy? With a bank stamp confirming authenticity. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she complied. As she stamped the page, she asked gently, Are you having trouble recovering funds? My son borrowed money, I said, and now he's pretending he didn't. She hesitated. I'm sorry. So am I answered. Back in my car, I laid the documents on the passenger seat and just looked at them. Paper doesn't lie. People do. When I got home, my phone buzzed again. Ethan. I let it ring twice before answering. What are you doing? He demanded without greeting. I'm organizing paperwork. For what? For the loan. A sharp exhale on the other end. You're unbelievable. You're acting like I committed a crime. You agreed it was a loan. It was family help. No, I said evenly. It was money you promised to return. His tone shifted. Softer now, almost amused. Mom, be realistic. You think a court is going to side with you over your own son? There's no contract. There are messages, I replied. Silence. Then, you wouldn't drag this into public record. That would make you look pathetic. That word, pathetic. I thought about the dinner, the laughter, the raised glass. No, I said quietly. It would make me look prepared. He laughed, but it sounded thinner this time. You're bluffing. Am I? He hung up. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened a folder on my dining table and began organizing everything chronologically. Transfer confirmation, printed messages, screenshots saved and dated. I even printed the message where he wrote, "Just a few weeks, Max." When I finished, I slid everything neatly into a binder. At 72 years old, I had learned something powerful. Emotion clouds. Documentation clarifies. Around 3 p.m., there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Ethan standing there, sunglasses on, jaw tight. This has gone far enough, he said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "No," I replied, closing the door behind him. "It hasn't gone far enough." He paced my living room like a restless teenager. "You're making me look bad. You did that yourself." He stopped walking. "You think you can scare me with paperwork?" I met his eyes calmly. "I don't need to scare you." I picked up the binder from the table and held it in both hands. "I just need the truth." For a split second, just a second, I saw something flicker in his expression. Not guilt. Concern. And that was the first time I knew for certain. He understood I wasn't bluffing. Ethan didn't sit down. He stood in the middle of my living room like he was inspecting property he still believed belonged to him. His sunglasses were still on, though there was no sun inside my house. That alone told me everything about the mood he'd arrived in. "This is ridiculous," he said, running a hand through his hair. "You're escalating something that didn't need to be escalated." "I gave you 7 days," I replied calmly. "You chose not to respond with a repayment plan." "I responded," he snapped. "You sent guilt, not numbers." His jaw tightened. He wasn't used to me answering like this. For most of his life, I softened things. I translated my boundaries into comfort so he wouldn't feel attacked. Today, I wasn't translating anything. He finally took off his sunglasses and looked directly at me. "You're going to embarrass yourself. You know that, right? You take this to court, people will talk. They already are. That's different." "How?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The answer would have required honesty. He tried another tactic. "Do you even understand what this will do to my business? If this shows up publicly, investors will question my stability." "I understand that actions have consequences," I said. He gave a short, incredulous laugh. "You're acting like I stole from you. You borrowed money and refused to return it." "I haven't refused. You've delayed, deflected, mocked, but you haven't paid." He started pacing again. The confident performance from the dinner table was gone. This was agitation, real agitation. "Fine," he said suddenly. "I'll send you something, a few thousand. Happy?" "That's not what we agreed to." "Oh my God, Mom, you're impossible." I needed breathing room. And I needed respect. He stopped walking. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I said something stupid at dinner," he muttered finally. "You know how it is. People were laughing. It wasn't meant like that. You meant it exactly like that." His eyes flashed. "You're overanalyzing." "No, I'm finally analyzing." Silence settled between us, thick and uncomfortable. He changed tone again, softer now, almost weary. "Why are you doing this, after everything I've done for you?" I almost smiled at that. "What exactly have you done for me, Ethan?" He stared at me as if the question itself were offensive. "I visit. I include you. I let you be part of things." "You let me?" That word hung in the air like smoke. "You're twisting this," he said. "You always do when you're emotional." "I'm not emotional," I replied evenly. "I'm organized." I reached for the binder on the table and opened it. The pages were neatly arranged, tabs marking each section. Bank documentation, message transcripts, dates highlighted. He stared at it. "You actually printed our texts?" "Yes." "You're unbelievable." "No," I said quietly. "I'm prepared." He walked closer and looked down at the top page. When he saw his own words, "just a few weeks max," something shifted in his expression. Not guilt. Calculation. "You think this proves anything?" he asked. "It proves intent." He exhaled sharply and straightened up. You're really going to drag your own son through court? If that's what it takes. He shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. You'd ruin our relationship over money. I met his gaze without flinching. Our relationship changed the moment you decided I was a joke. That hit. I saw it land. For a second, I wondered if he would apologize. Not strategically, not defensively, just honestly. Instead, he hardened. Do what you want, he said. But don't expect me to come crawling back when you realize how stupid this is. I'm not asking you to crawl, I replied. I'm asking you to pay. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. You won't win, he said. That's not the point. He hesitated, as if trying to read whether I meant that. Then he left. The door closed with a firm click. I stood in the quiet house and listened to the sound of his car pulling away. My heart was beating steadily, not wildly. There was no panic, no regret, just certainty. He believed I wouldn't go through with it. He believed motherhood was permanent leverage. What he didn't understand was this. Love can be unconditional. Access is not. I walked back to the dining table, picked up my phone, and searched for a local attorney specializing in civil recovery. If he wanted to test how serious I was, he was about to find out. The attorney's office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building downtown, the kind with polished brass letters near the elevator and a faint smell of old paper in the hallway. I arrived 10 minutes early. I've always believed that if you want to be taken seriously, you arrive before your emotions do. His name was Daniel Mercer. Mid-50s, calm eyes, firm handshake. He didn't oversmile or try to soften the situation with jokes, which I appreciated immediately. What brings you in? He asked once we were seated. My son borrowed $25,000, I said evenly. He agreed it was a loan. Now he's refusing to repay it and publicly mocking me for asking. Mr. Mercer nodded once. Do you have documentation? I placed the binder on his desk and slid it toward him. I have the transfer confirmation with memo notation, printed text messages acknowledging it as a loan, and written requests for repayment. He opened the binder and began flipping through the pages slowly, carefully. No rush, no dramatic reactions. Just professional evaluation. This is good, he said after a few moments. Good, I repeated. Yes, the memo line alone helps. But these messages strengthen the intent. Courts look at patterns, language, promises. You have those? I felt a small shift inside my chest. Not relief exactly. Validation. He claims it was family help, I said. Did you ever use the word gift? No. Did he? Not until recently. Mr. Mercer nodded again. Intent at the time of transfer matters more than what someone claims afterward. He closed the binder and folded his hands. Before we go further, I need to ask, are you prepared for this to strain or even permanently damage your relationship with your son? I didn't answer immediately. It already has, I said finally. He held my gaze, assessing whether that answer came from anger or clarity. And what outcome are you seeking? He asked. Repayment, in full, according to the agreement. Not punishment? No. Not leverage? No. He gave a slight nod. Then this is a straightforward civil recovery case. Straightforward. There was something almost absurd about that word. Nothing about suing your own child feels straightforward. But legally, apparently, it could be. He explained the process carefully. First, a formal demand letter drafted by his office. It would outline the amount owed, reference documentation, and give a final deadline. If ignored, we would file a civil claim. From there, mediation opportunities. possibly court. He may attempt to pressure you emotionally once he receives the letter, Mr. Mercer added, or publicly discredit you. He's already started, I replied. Then from this point forward, keep everything in writing. No verbal agreements, no side conversations. I nodded. There was one question I hadn't asked yet. Do parents usually win cases like this? I said quietly. He didn't hesitate. When documentation is clear? Yes. I signed the representation agreement. The pen didn't shake in my hand. As I stood to leave, Mr. Mercer said something that stayed with me. Standing up for yourself is not cruelty. It's boundary enforcement. Outside, the afternoon air felt sharper, cleaner. I sat in my car for a moment before starting the engine. Then my phone buzzed. Ethan. I let it ring. A voicemail notification appeared seconds later. I didn't listen immediately. Instead, I placed the phone face down on the passenger seat, the same way I had done before. For the first time since the dinner, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not sadness. Control. When I finally pressed play, his voice came through tight and controlled. Mom, I heard you're talking to lawyers. If you go through with this, don't expect things to ever be the same. I stared at the windshield as his words echoed in the car. They already weren't. I started the engine and drove home. The demand letter would go out tomorrow, and once it did, there would be no pretending this was just a family misunderstanding. It would be official, and so would I. The demand letter was delivered on a Tuesday morning at 9:17 a.m. I know the exact time because Mr. Mercer's office sent me the confirmation email with the courier's signature attached. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't text him. I simply waited. It took less than an hour. At 10:02 a.m., my phone began vibrating nonstop. First Ethan, then his wife Lila, then my sister, then a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. I answered none of them. Instead, I opened the family group chat. Ethan had already written 3 long messages. Can you believe this? She's actually threatening to sue me. This is elder paranoia at its finest. Elder paranoia. Several relatives responded immediately. Oh no, this can't be real. Maybe there's a misunderstanding? Then Ethan added, she transferred me money as support. Now she wants it back because she's hurt. Support. I stared at that word. He was rewriting it publicly now. My phone rang again. This time, it was Lila. I let it go to voicemail. Her message came in seconds later, her voice tight and strained. What are you doing? Do you want to destroy our family? Ethan is under so much stress. If this becomes public record, it could ruin opportunities for him. Is that what you want? No mention of the money, no mention of the agreement. Only reputation. I sat at my kitchen table, reading every message in silence. Then something unexpected happened. Mia texted me privately. Grandma, Dad is freaking out. He said you'd never actually send a lawyer letter. He told everyone you were bluffing. I felt a quiet confirmation settle in my chest. He truly hadn't believed I would follow through. Another message from Mia came seconds later. He's saying you're confused about what the money was for. I typed back carefully. Was I confused when he said it was a short-term loan? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. No, she wrote. You weren't. A new message popped up in the group chat. Ethan, if she goes through with this, I'm done. Completely done. There it was. The ultimatum. Not repayment, not explanation. Punishment. I finally decided to respond publicly. I typed slowly, deliberately. The money transferred on March 3rd was documented as a loan. I have written confirmation of that agreement. A formal demand letter was issued today requesting repayment terms. This is not emotional. It is contractual. I read it twice. Then I pressed send. Silence filled the chat. No emojis. No immediate reactions. Then my sister wrote, "Is this really necessary?" I replied, "Yes." Nothing else. Minutes later, Ethan responded privately. "You've made your point. You embarrassed me. Congratulations." "I didn't embarrass you," I wrote back. "You embarrassed yourself. You're choosing money over your son. I'm choosing self-respect." There was a long pause. Then he sent something different. "You know I can drag this out, right? Lawyers cost money, time, stress. You're not built for that." I almost smiled. He still thought this was about stamina. At 72, I had buried a husband, survived cancer, rebuilt my finances from scratch, and raised a child largely on my own. He believed paperwork would exhaust me. "You underestimate me," I typed. He didn't respond. An hour later, Mr. Mercer called. "I assume he's reacted," he said calmly. "Yes. That's common. Emotional pressure is the first move. If he ignores the letter, we proceed to filing." "How long do we give him?" 14 days. 14 days. I thanked him and hung up. The house was quiet again, but the tone had shifted. This was no longer a private disagreement between mother and son. This was a documented dispute, and everyone now knew it. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at my small, well-kept garden. For years, I had pruned carefully, removed what threatened the health of the whole. Sometimes, I thought, love requires the same discipline. The 14 days passed without a payment plan. On the 15th morning, I received a call from Mr. Mercer at 8:30 sharp. "We're filing today," he said. I closed my eyes for just a moment, not out of hesitation, out of acknowledgement. Once filed, there would be a case number, a record, a timeline that could not be undone. "Yes," I said. "Let's proceed." By noon, it was official. Civil claim filed. I expected fury from Ethan. Instead, what came first was something quieter. His wife showed up at my door. Lila looked different from the last time I'd seen her. No polished smile. No carefully styled composure. She looked tired. "I just want to talk," she said. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't sit. She stood near the doorway like she wasn't sure how long she'd stay. "Do you understand what this could do?" she began. "Court filings are public. Investors look at these things. Partners look at these things." "Then he should have repaid the loan," I answered. She exhaled sharply. "He doesn't have that kind of liquidity right now." "He did when he accepted it." She pressed her lips together. "It wasn't supposed to turn into this." "Then it shouldn't have." Her voice softened, shifting tone. "He's under pressure. He feels attacked. He called me a walking wallet," I said evenly, in front of his daughter. Lila looked away. "That was stupid," she admitted. "He shouldn't have said that." "But he did." Silence settled between us. She tried a different angle. "If this goes forward, legal fees will eat into whatever he owes. You might not even come out ahead." "This isn't about coming out ahead. It feels like punishment. It's accountability." She studied my face carefully, as if searching for anger she could challenge. There was none. "You're serious," she said quietly. "Yes." She nodded slowly, almost reluctantly accepting it. "Then I should tell you something," she added, her voice lower now. He didn't use that money for what he told you. My body remained still, but something inside me sharpened. What do you mean? He said it was for a temporary business shortfall, she continued. It wasn't. He used it to cover losses from a private investment that went wrong. He didn't want anyone to know. An investment, not a delayed transfer, not a short-term gap. A loss. He was embarrassed, she said. He thought he could fix it before you noticed. I held her gaze. He thought I wouldn't ask. She didn't deny that. And he thought you'd never go this far, she admitted. That I already knew. Lila moved toward the door. I don't know how this ends, she said. But once it reaches court, it won't just be about the loan. I'm aware. She hesitated, then added quietly, he's not as confident as he pretends. After she left, I stood in the hallway for a long moment. An undisclosed loss. A lie about purpose. Public mockery to deflect attention. The pieces were arranging themselves. At 3 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Ethan. I answered this time. What did you tell her? He demanded. I didn't tell her anything. She told me. Silence. You shouldn't be discussing my finances with anyone, he said sharply. You discussed mine at dinner. That's different. No, I replied calmly. It isn't. He lowered his voice. You're blowing this up over pride. No, I said. You did that. I'm just responding. There was a long pause. You're going to regret this, he said finally. I already regretted staying silent. He hung up. I placed the phone down slowly and walked back to the dining table where the binder still sat. What had begun as a repayment issue was now revealing something larger. Not just unpaid money, a pattern of deception. And if he thought court would intimidate me, he was about to discover something he had forgotten about his mother. I do not step into battles lightly, but once I step in, I do not step back. Within 2 days of the case being filed, the atmosphere around me shifted in a way that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't loud at first. It was subtle. Fewer replies in the family chat. Longer pauses before anyone responded to my messages. Invitations that suddenly felt delayed or, accidentally, forgotten. Ethan wasn't shouting anymore. He was repositioning. I found out how on Sunday afternoon when my cousin Margaret called. Her voice carried that careful tone people use when they think they're being neutral, but have already chosen a side. I just want to understand, she said. Ethan told us you're doing this because you're lonely, that you feel left out of his success, and this is retaliation. I let that sit for a second. Lonely. Retaliation. It was almost impressive how neatly he reframed it. Did he mention the signed transfer memo? I asked calmly. Or the messages where he called it a loan? Well, he said you're misinterpreting things, that it was family support. I could picture it clearly now. Private phone calls, controlled tone, selective storytelling. Painting himself as the overwhelmed son attacked by an aging mother who couldn't handle change. He also told people I'm confused, I said quietly. Margaret hesitated. He said you've been more emotional lately. There it was, the oldest tactic in the book. Question the stability of the older person. Suggest decline. Plant doubt. Margaret, I said evenly, if someone borrowed money from you, documented it as a loan, promised repayment, then publicly mocked you for asking for it back, what would you call that? Silence. I suppose I'd call it disrespect, she admitted. Exactly. After we hung up, I didn't feel hurt. I felt informed. The smear campaign wasn't explosive. It was surgical. Ethan wasn't trying to destroy me outright. He was trying to weaken my credibility before court. That evening, Mia came by unexpectedly. She looked anxious, glancing at her phone more than once as if she was worried someone might track her movements. "Dad's been calling relatives nonstop," she said as soon as she stepped inside. "He's saying you're trying to teach him a lesson because you don't like how independent he's become." I almost laughed at that. Independent. "He also said if this keeps going, he might have to countersue for defamation," she added quietly. "On what grounds?" I asked. "He says you're damaging his reputation by implying he's dishonest." I studied my granddaughter's face. "Is he dishonest?" She didn't answer directly. She didn't need to. "He's scared," she admitted instead. "I've never seen him this tense." That caught my attention. Fear changes behavior, and fear often leads to mistakes. The next morning, Mr. Mercer called to update me. Ethan's attorney had responded, not with a repayment plan, but with a formal denial. They were claiming the transfer was a voluntary familial gift and that no legally binding repayment terms existed. I wasn't surprised. "What's our next step?" I asked. "We move forward," he said calmly. "We present documentation. If they want to argue intent, we let the evidence speak." After the call, I opened my laptop and reread the printed messages again. "Just a few weeks, Max." "Small loan?" "I'll send you a repayment schedule." Words written casually, confidently, before he believed he'd ever be held to them. By midweek, the pressure increased. An old family friend stopped me at the grocery store. "I heard about the lawsuit," she said, lowering her voice. "Are you sure this is worth all the drama?" I smiled politely. It was worth $25,000 to him. That shut the conversation down. But the moment that stayed with me happened later that night. Ethan called again, but this time his voice was different, less sharp, less aggressive. "You're really not backing down, are you?" he asked. "No. This is going to get ugly." "It already did," I replied. He exhaled slowly. "You're forcing me into a corner." "No," I said calmly. "You walked there yourself." There was a long silence on the line, heavier than any before. "You think this ends well?" he finally asked. "I think it ends honestly." When I hung up, I realized something important. He had stopped trying to shame me. He had stopped trying to intimidate me. Now he was trying to predict the damage. Which meant he knew there was damage to predict. And for the first time since that dinner, I sensed a shift in power. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. He was no longer certain he would win. The offer came late on a Thursday evening, almost 2 weeks before our preliminary hearing. I knew it was an offer before I even opened the email, because Mr. Mercer had warned me this would happen. When pressure rises, he had said, people look for controlled exits. The message wasn't from Ethan directly. It came from his attorney. They were proposing a settlement discussion. The language was polished, professional, almost respectful. They acknowledged the transfer of funds but continued to dispute the characterization of it as a formal loan. However, in the interest of family harmony, their client was willing to offer partial reimbursement. Partial. I called Mr. Mercer immediately. "They're testing you," he said. "It's common. They want to see if you're tired." "How partial?" I asked. $5,000, with no admission of debt. I let out a slow breath. 5,000. Out of 25. "And in return?" I asked. "You'd withdraw the case and sign a confidentiality agreement." I almost smiled. So that was the real goal. Silence. No, I said calmly. I assumed as much, he replied. But I need your formal instruction. Decline it, I said. In writing. Within the hour, the rejection was sent. It took Ethan less than 10 minutes to call. You're unbelievable, he said without greeting. That was generous. It was incomplete, I answered. It was a compromise. A compromise implies shared responsibility. His tone sharpened. You want to drag this through court for 20 grand? For 25, I corrected. You're obsessed. I'm consistent. He exhaled sharply, frustration bleeding through. Do you know how this looks? You're squeezing your own son. You squeezed me first. There was a long pause. Then he shifted tactics again. What if I pay 10? He asked suddenly. In installments. No lawyers. No court. We end this. That's not what you owe. You're being rigid. No, I said quietly. I'm being precise. His voice dropped lower. You're going to regret pushing me like this. That depends, I replied, on what you do next. Another silence. He was measuring something now. Then he said something that caught my attention. You really think you have enough to prove intent? I don't think, I answered. I know. He didn't respond immediately. I could almost hear his mind working. Mom, he said finally, his voice softer now, almost persuasive. Why are you doing this publicly? If you cared about respect, you'd handle it privately. I tried, I said. He didn't deny that. And you laughed. That landed. I heard the change in his breathing. You're punishing me for one stupid comment, he muttered. No, I said steadily. I'm holding you accountable for a broken agreement. When he hung up, it wasn't in anger this time. It was abrupt, controlled, strategic. The next morning, something else happened. Mr. Mercer forwarded me a document filed by Ethan's legal team. It wasn't just a denial anymore. They were now claiming that at the time of the transfer, I expressed pride in supporting my son's entrepreneurial ambitions, and therefore implied a gift dynamic. Implied. They were constructing narrative. I read the document carefully, slowly. And then I saw it. They had attached selected message screenshots. Selected. Out of context. He was no longer just defending himself. He was editing the story. I closed the document and picked up my phone. I opened my full message archive and scrolled back to the very first exchange where he had written, just a small loan, a few weeks max. Not included in his filing. Of course not. I forwarded the complete thread to Mr. Mercer with one sentence. They forgot something. He called within minutes, and for the first time since this began, I heard something almost like satisfaction in his voice. Well, he said calmly, that changes the tone. How? I asked. Selective omission in early filings can hurt credibility later. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of that. Ethan thought this was negotiation, but he had just made it evidence. The pre-trial conference was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a gray Monday morning, and I arrived 15 minutes early. Not because I was nervous, because I refused to rush into rooms where people expect me to hesitate. Mr. Mercer met me outside the courtroom doors, briefcase in hand, calm as ever. They've reviewed the full message thread, he said quietly. Their tone may shift today. Shift how? I asked. From denial to negotiation. Inside the small conference room, Ethan was already seated with his attorney. He didn't look at me at first. He was staring at a legal pad, jaw tight, pen tapping in small, controlled movements. When he finally did glance up, there was no smirk this time. No performance, just calculation. The judge entered briefly to outline procedural expectations and encourage settlement discussion before trial. Then we were left to negotiate. Ethan's attorney began smoothly. Our client maintains that the funds were provided in a familial context without formal contractual structure. However, in the interest of avoiding prolonged litigation, Mr. Mercer interrupted gently. The memo line labeled the transfer as a loan. The written messages confirm repayment expectation. Selective omission in prior filings has already been corrected. We are prepared to proceed. Silence settled over the table. Ethan finally spoke. "This is insane," he muttered, though it sounded less like anger and more like disbelief. "You're really willing to put this on public record?" "It already is," I replied calmly. He met my eyes then, searching for something. Softness, perhaps. Doubt. He didn't find it. His attorney cleared his throat. "We are prepared to offer $15,000 as full and final settlement, paid within 60 days. I didn't answer immediately. I let the number sit in the air. 15. 10,000 short. "And the remaining balance?" Mr. Mercer asked. "Our client believes this represents a reasonable compromise given the absence of formal written contract." I spoke then, my voice steady. "The absence of a formal contract does not erase written acknowledgement of debt." Ethan leaned forward. "You're not going to get everything," he said quietly. "That's not how this works." "It is when the evidence is clear," I answered. He exhaled sharply and leaned back again. Mr. Mercer turned slightly toward me. "We can proceed to trial. Based on documentation, our position is strong. But I want to be clear. Trial exposes everything. Financial records. Statements under oath?" Ethan's eyes flickered at that. "Financial records." His attorney noticed it too. "There is no need to escalate into invasive discovery," she said quickly. "We're trying to resolve this amicably." "Amicable ended at dinner," I replied before I could stop myself. The room went quiet. For the first time, Ethan didn't argue. He just looked tired. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Repayment in full," I said, "according to what you agreed to." "And if I don't?" "Then we let the court decide." He held my gaze for several long seconds. There was something different in his expression now. Not arrogance, not mockery. Uncertainty. His attorney leaned toward him and whispered something I couldn't hear. He nodded once, stiffly. "We need time to review the expanded evidence," she said aloud. "We request a brief continuance." Mr. Mercer nodded. "That's reasonable." The judge re-entered shortly after, set new dates, and adjourned. As we stepped into the hallway, Ethan stopped beside me. For a moment, it was just the two of us. "You're enjoying this," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "I'm enduring it." He studied my face as if trying to reconcile this version of me with the one he thought he knew. "You could still walk away," he said. "So could you." He didn't respond. As he walked down the hallway, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. His shoulders weren't squared anymore. They were tense. And that tension told me something important. The closer we moved toward trial, the more control was slipping from his hands. The morning of the trial arrived without drama. No thunderstorm, no cinematic tension in the air. Just a clear sky and a courthouse that looked exactly as ordinary as it had during the preliminary hearing. I dressed the same way I had before. Calm colors, steady hands, nothing theatrical. If this day was going to carry weight, it would be because of facts, not emotion. Inside the courtroom, everything felt smaller than I expected. A few rows of benches. A quiet clerk organizing files. Ethan stood near his attorney, speaking in a low voice. He looked composed, but I noticed the tightness around his mouth. When he saw me, he didn't smirk this time. He simply nodded once. We were sworn in, and the proceedings began. Ethan's attorney opened with a controlled narrative. She described a supportive mother assisting her son during a temporary financial challenge. She emphasized the absence of a signed contract, the informal nature of family exchanges, and the emotional context surrounding the dispute. She painted it carefully, no villain, just misunderstanding. Then it was our turn. Mr. Mercer didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize. He laid out a timeline. March 3rd, transfer of $25,000. Memo line, loan, short term. Subsequent written messages acknowledging repayment. Repeated written requests for schedule. Public refusal. Demand letter. Filing. He handed copies of the complete message thread to the judge, including the portions previously omitted by Ethan's side. The room was quiet as the pages turned. When Ethan was called to testify, he walked to the stand with controlled confidence. He confirmed receiving the money, confirmed the memo line, confirmed the messages. But when asked why he hadn't repaid it, his answers began to shift. I believed it was flexible, he said. Flexible, Mr. Mercer repeated. Meaning? Meaning there wasn't a strict deadline? Was there an expectation of repayment? A pause. I assumed we'd work it out. That wasn't the question, Mr. Mercer replied calmly. Was there an expectation of repayment? Another pause. Longer this time. Yes, Ethan said finally. The word hung in the air. His attorney shifted in her seat. Mr. Mercer continued. Did you ever inform your mother, in writing, that you considered the funds a gift at the time of transfer? No. Did you refer to it as a loan in your written messages? Yes. And when she requested repayment, did you publicly refer to her as a walking wallet at a family gathering? Ethan stiffened. That was taken out of context. Did you say it? Silence. Yes. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes forward. When I was called to testify, I spoke simply. I described the request, the agreement, the timeline. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't cry. I didn't attack his character. I answered questions directly. Then came the moment his attorney tried to shift the tone. Mrs. Carter, she said, isn't it true that you've expressed pride in supporting your son's ambitions? Yes, I replied. So wouldn't financial support align with that pride? Support and loans are not the same, I said evenly. Pride does not cancel repayment. There was a faint murmur in the room that was quickly silenced. The final exchange of the morning came when the judge asked Ethan directly, why did you not formalize repayment once it became clear your mother expected it? Ethan hesitated. I didn't think she'd take it this far, he said. Did you hear that? He didn't think she'd push it. Not that he didn't owe it, just that she'd stay quiet. Tell me honestly, would you stay silent, or would you finally draw the line? Honest. Perhaps unintentionally so. The judge made a note. As the session adjourned for a short recess before closing statements, I remained seated. My heart was steady, not racing, not trembling. For the first time since this began, the conversation was no longer emotional, no longer strategic. It was factual, and facts do not bend for pride. When we returned from recess, the air in the courtroom felt different. The first half of the trial had been controlled, almost clinical. But now there was tension beneath the surface, something sharper. This was where narratives either held or cracked? Ethan's attorney stood for redirect. Her tone changed from technical to personal. Ethan, she began gently, how has this lawsuit affected you emotionally? He shifted slightly in the witness chair. It's been humiliating, he said. I feel attacked. I feel like my own mother is trying to damage my reputation. Has this impacted your business relationships? Yes, he replied. Partners are asking questions. Investors are cautious. And why do you believe your mother chose to pursue litigation instead of resolving this privately? There it was, the pivot. He hesitated just long enough to make it look thoughtful. I think she resented my independence, he said carefully. I've built something successful. Sometimes parents struggle with letting go. A few heads turned subtly in the courtroom. I remained still. Resentment, independence. The framing was intentional. If he couldn't win on documentation, he would win on motive. When it was our turn again, Mr. Mercer didn't react emotionally. He simply approached with a different folder. Your Honor, he said calmly, we'd like to address motive with context. He handed up printed copies of additional messages Ethan had sent weeks before the dinner. Messages that had nothing to do with pride or independence. One read, if I don't patch this loss quickly, it could look bad. Another, I just need a bridge. You're the only one I can ask without raising red flags. The judge read them carefully. Mr. Carter? Mr. Mercer continued. Were these messages sent prior to the transfer? Yes. And in these messages, you described the funds as a temporary bridge to cover a financial loss? Yes. Did you inform your mother that the funds were to cover an investment loss rather than a delayed business transfer, as you previously claimed? Silence. No, Ethan said quietly. And when she requested repayment, did you offer a structured plan? No. Instead, you publicly mocked her? His jaw tightened. I made a mistake. A mistake, Mr. Mercer repeated calmly. Or a strategy? Ethan didn't answer. The judge leaned forward slightly. Answer the question. Ethan exhaled. I didn't think she'd push it. There it was again. Not denial. Expectation. Expectation that I would absorb it, that I would stay silent. That motherhood meant unlimited extension. Mr. Mercer stepped back. No further questions. The courtroom fell quiet. The tension was no longer about whether the money had been transferred. That had never been disputed. It was about credibility now, and credibility had shifted. The judge addressed both sides briefly, clarifying that the central issue was intent at the time of transfer and acknowledgement of repayment obligation. The documentation, she noted, would weigh heavily. As the session moved toward closing arguments, Ethan avoided looking at me. The confidence he had worn like armor during the dinner months ago was gone. What remained was calculation and something else. Recognition. Recognition that this was no longer a private family matter he could control with charm or pressure. This was evidence, and evidence does not laugh at dinner tables. Closing arguments began without theatrics, no dramatic pacing, no raised voices. Just two very different versions of the same story standing side by side, waiting to be weighed. Ethan's attorney went first. She focused on tone more than text. She spoke about family dynamics, about informal agreements between parents and children, about how love does not always come with paperwork. She emphasized the absence of a signed contract, repeating that phrase more than once. There was no legally drafted loan agreement, she said carefully. There were conversations. There was context. There was history. History. As if history erased clarity. She acknowledged the memo line, but suggested it was casual wording. She acknowledged the messages but framed them as fluid discussions. She described my decision to litigate as an escalation that transformed a family disagreement into a public dispute. Then she sat down. Mr. Mercer stood slowly. He did not respond to her tone. He responded to her structure. Intent, he began calmly, is not defined by formal templates. It is defined by language, acknowledgement, and behavior. He walked through it one final time. The request, the wording, small loan. The promise, a few weeks max. The memo, loan, short term. The follow-up requests, the absence of denial at the time of transfer. The admission under oath that repayment had been expected. Then he paused. This case is not about family conflict, he said. It is about accountability. The defendant admitted expectation of repayment. He admitted choosing not to formalize it because he believed it would not be enforced. That belief does not nullify obligation. He sat down. The courtroom was quiet enough that I could hear the faint hum of the overhead lights. The judge began reviewing her notes. She spoke deliberately, methodically, walking through the elements required to establish a civil loan agreement. Transfer of funds. Undisputed. Documentation labeling funds as a loan. Established. Written acknowledgement of repayment expectation. Established. Subsequent failure to repay. Undisputed. She looked up at Ethan. Mr. Carter, your primary defense rests on the absence of a formal contract, she said. However, the law recognizes enforceable agreements formed through written acknowledgement and conduct. The documentation in this case reflects clear intent at the time of transfer. Ethan's hands tightened on the table in front of him. The judge continued. Additionally, selective omission of relevant message context in early filings undermines the credibility of your position. There it was. Credibility. She paused briefly before delivering the conclusion. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The words were not loud, not dramatic, just precise. Full repayment of $25,000 is ordered in addition to court costs. Payment is to be completed within 60 days. Failure to comply will result in further enforcement action. For a second, no one moved. Then Ethan exhaled sharply and leaned back in his chair. Not angry, not explosive. Defeated. His attorney leaned toward him, speaking quietly, already discussing next steps. But the decision had been made. I did not smile. I did not celebrate. I simply sat there and let the weight of it settle. The money mattered. Yes, but what mattered more was the acknowledgement. The confirmation that I had not imagined the agreement, that I had not misremembered, that I had not been emotional or confused. I had been correct. As we stood to leave, Ethan finally looked at me. You won, he said quietly. No, I replied. The truth did. He shook his head slightly, as if that distinction irritated him. Outside the courtroom, reporters were not waiting. There were no flashing cameras. Just a hallway, a few strangers, and the sound of shoes against tile. Mia was there. She stepped forward quickly and wrapped her arms around me without hesitation. I felt her shoulders shaking slightly. I'm sorry, she whispered, for everything. You didn't do anything wrong, I said softly. Behind her, Ethan walked past without another word. He did not look back. And for the first time since that dinner months ago, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel until the outcome was certain. Not victory. Release. The 60 days passed more slowly than I expected. Winning in court had not ended anything. It had simply shifted the battlefield. The ruling was clear, the deadline documented, but payment had not yet arrived. Ethan had that look in the hallway after the verdict, the look of someone already calculating the next move. For the first 3 weeks, there was silence. No calls, no messages, no family pressure. It was almost eerie. The group chat had gone dormant. Relatives who had once asked me whether it was worth the drama were suddenly quiet. Then on day 26, Mr. Mercer called. "They've requested structured payment terms," he said. "They're not appealing the decision." That surprised me. Ethan had always hated losing. I expected pride to push him toward appeal, even if it cost more in the long run. "What are the terms?" I asked. "Half within 30 days, the remainder within 60, plus court costs." "And if he fails?" "We move for enforcement. Wage garnishment, asset liens, standard procedure." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Proceed." 2 days later, the first payment arrived. $12,500 transferred directly into my account, labeled simply court-ordered payment. No apology, no note, just compliance. I stared at the transaction for a long time. It felt different from the original transfer. That one had been wrapped in trust. This one was wrapped in consequence. Word spread quickly once relatives realized the court had ruled in my favor. My sister called again, but her tone was softer now. "I didn't realize you had that much documentation," she admitted. "I did," I said. "I just thought, well, I thought maybe you were overreacting." "I wasn't," she paused. "He's been different lately, quieter." I didn't respond to that. A week later, I ran into Ethan at the grocery store. Not planned, not orchestrated, just 2 carts in the same aisle. He looked thinner. Not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. We stood there for a moment, facing each other between shelves of cereal boxes like strangers who shared a history neither wanted to summarize. "I'm paying it," he said flatly. "I know. You didn't have to make it this public. You did that." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. After a few seconds, he added, "You could have talked to me." I tried. He didn't deny that either. The second payment came on day 58, full amount. Court costs included, no delays. Mr. Mercer confirmed receipt and closure of the case. "You have no further obligations," he said. "It's complete." Complete. That word felt heavier than the verdict. I sat at my dining table that evening, the same table where I had organized the binder months ago. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt tense. It felt clear. Mia came over later that night. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "He's embarrassed," she said softly. "Not just about losing, about how it happened." "That was his choice," I replied. "He didn't think you'd follow through." "I know." She studied my face. "Do you regret it?" I considered that honestly. "No," I said, "but I don't celebrate it either." The money now sat in my account, restored, whole. But something else had shifted too. Access. For years, Ethan had assumed that because I loved him, my resources were automatically his safety net. My silence was guaranteed. My patience infinite. That assumption was gone now. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with my financial advisor. Not because I needed help managing the money, but because I wanted structure. I reallocated the full amount into a protected account designated for Mia's future education and housing. It would be legally shielded, inaccessible to anyone else. When I signed the paperwork, I felt something settle into place. This wasn't revenge. It was redirection. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. I hope it was worth it. I stared at the words for a long moment before replying. It was necessary. He didn't answer. And for the first time since that dinner, I realized something important. He no longer saw me as leverage. He saw me as someone capable of consequence. The case was closed. The payments were complete. The court file was stamped and archived. On paper, everything had returned to balance. But families are not paper. For a few weeks after the final transfer, there was silence. No invitations, no tense group messages, just distance. It wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, measured. As if everyone was recalibrating how to stand around me now, I used that time carefully. I updated my will, not out of spite, not in anger, out of clarity. I met with my attorney and restructured everything with precision. What would go to whom, under what conditions? What would be protected? What would not? Are you certain? He asked gently at one point. Yes, I said. Certainty is the point. Ethan was not removed from my life, but he was removed from assumption. No automatic access. No silent expectations. No unwritten understandings. Love remained. Entitlement did not. Mia visited often during that period. She never asked for details about the paperwork. She didn't need to. What she needed was reassurance that I wasn't hardened by what had happened. Are you okay? She asked one evening as we sat in the garden. Yes, I said honestly. I'm steadier than I was before. She nodded slowly. Dad says you chose money over family. I looked at her carefully. No, I chose respect within family. She thought about that for a long time. About a month later, Ethan asked to meet. Not at my house, not at his. A neutral cafe downtown. He arrived first this time. When I walked in, he stood up, not dramatically, just automatically. There was no audience, no raised glass, no performance. We sat. I'm not here to re-argue it, he said after a moment. It's done. Yes, I agreed. He stirred his coffee without drinking it. I misjudged you. That's true. A faint, humorless smile crossed his face. I didn't think you'd take it that far. I didn't think you'd take it that lightly. That sat between us. He didn't apologize in the way movies teach people to apologize. There was no speech, no emotional unraveling. But there was something else. Restraint. Measured acknowledgement. I was embarrassed, he admitted finally, about the investment. About losing money. I didn't want people to know. So, you chose to make me the joke instead, I said. He didn't argue. I thought if I minimized it, you'd drop it, he added quietly. That was your mistake. He nodded once. We didn't hug when we left. We didn't declare forgiveness. But there was something different in the air. Boundaries. Clear ones. That night, after I returned home, I sat alone at the same dining table where this entire journey had shifted months ago. The house felt calm, not triumphant, not heavy, just grounded. I did not sue my son because I wanted to win. I sued him because I refused to disappear. There is a difference. When people say, but it's family, what they often mean is, endure it. I decided not to endure it. I decided to document it, to respond to it, to stand inside it without shrinking. And whether you agree with my decision or not, understand this. Silence is not always grace. Sometimes silence is surrender. I chose not to surrender. My dear friends, we've reached the end of this story. Tell me honestly, would you have done the same? Or would you have handled it differently? I don't believe there's only one right answer, but I do believe in self-respect. If this story moved you, if it made you think, like and share your thoughts in the comments, and if you value stories where older women don't stay silent, subscribe. There are many more conversations we need to have.